Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Schaefer. Thank you for joining us. If you've joined us this week or last week, we've been primarily focused on cases about asylum and withholding of removal, and that is in anticipation of the live Q&A discussion that attorney Aaron Shapiro and I will be co-hosting tomorrow on Facebook and YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Like us, follow us so you don't miss out, and set your reminder. Today, I have another exciting, notable asylum case to talk about. This case is particularly notable for a couple of reasons, but for one big reason for me, because it was the first case I ever won in immigration court. This was back in the day, and it was winning this case means a lot to me, and I just remember my client's face when she finally realized that this was all over. She's never going to have to go back home. She just cried and hugged me, and it was really touching, and I'll never forget it, and it made me really want to continue to do this type of work. So this client, she is a native and citizen of Mali. Her asylum claim was based on her membership in a particular social group, which can be defined in a couple of different ways. I haven't really gotten into this before. We'll get more into this tomorrow at the Q&A, but you don't just put forth one particular social group, you put forth every particular social group that it can fall into. I'll talk about what that actually means tomorrow, but essentially what I'm meaning today is that one of the grounds was she was a Malayan woman who subject to domestic violence. She was a woman subject to FGM, or female circumcision. And she was a female from Mali who couldn't get out of a domestic relationship. So those were just a couple of the ways we phrased it. And in the Second Circuit, Second Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that anyone who's been subject to FGM in the past, that makes them a refugee. So there's a presumption of future that you're. I'm going to say this wrong. That there's a rebuttable presumption of future persecution, and then the government has to rebut it if they can. But essentially, this is very similar to the Chinese cases with sterilization, where they say, if you went through sterilization, that's so traumatizing. There's so many issues that go on with your body after it that you're eligible for asylum, essentially. So the first issue with this case is that the client had entered the U.S. This was her third time entering. So whenever you have an entry and you go back home, we have to explain, why were you not afraid to go back then, but you're afraid to go back now? The first time she came was 2007, and her father was trying to make her marry a man more than twice her age. She was a teenager. And this is common. I see this a lot with clients, that they come here, they think, I'll stay in the US a few months. I don't want to violate my visitor visa. And when I go home, whatever they were trying to pressure me to do, they'll forget about it. Well, that didn't work. So she came back again a year later, and did the same thing. She stayed for a few months. When that didn't work, and then she went back to Mali. And when that didn't work, she came back to the US in 2009, and she had entered with a B2 visa each time. In 2009, she then applied to change her status to an F1 student so she can study English. And at that point, she actually did submit her application before her status was up, so she did get a grant and did start going to school full time. She filed, and here's where the next issue comes up, she filed for asylum in June 2010. That means since she entered in May 2009, it was more than a year after her most recent entry. So in order for her to get asylum, we had to prove an exception to the 1-year filing deadline. Now, she was in legal status when she filed, which is one of the exceptions, but you still has to be reasonable in why you decided to file when you did. So that was actually one of the things we talked about at court. Why did you wait until after you changed status? Because when she changed status to an F1, at least as long as she's in school, she doesn't have to go back. Why did you file for asylum a month after that? You were in school. And she said the reason is she ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock. And that is when it went from, I'm just trying to get away so that I'm not being forced to marry, to, if I go home, I'm going to be persecuted. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be ostracized. And unfortunately, that was a reality for her, because in her family and her ethnicity, she was I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I apologize if I do, Kinsoka is her ethnicity. The women are not treated properly, and police in Mali do not get involved in domestic violence disputes. So she was terrified of going back once she found out that she was pregnant, and that's why she filed for asylum. And it was only a month after her 1 year. But if she wasn't in legal status and that wasn't the reason, it wouldn't matter. Now, there could have been an exception based on changed circumstances that she got pregnant, but that's a lot harder because you're really supposed to be change country conditions, not change circumstances on your part. But anyways, we didn't have to deal with that. All we had to do was prove she was still in school. So we submitted her I-20s to show that. And she also, like I said, she had been subjected to FGM when she was 2 years old and continued to have medical problems ever since. So that was also part of her claim. And then another interesting thing was that on her referral notice from the asylum office, they said clearly she suffered past persecution because of the FGM, and that means she's a refugee. But there's material inconsistencies in her application, so we can't approve it, and that's why it was referred to the judge. So we didn't file her initial application. I wasn't even a lawyer then. But the person who filed the initial application, the attorney that she went to, I'm not sure if it was because my client had limited English skills at the time, or or what happened with the application. But when I went over the application with her, she was like, I didn't tell him that. I didn't tell him to write that. But I was like, but you signed it. And honestly, this is an issue we see a lot with people. You need to make sure that you read over your application very carefully, especially your statement, and that if you can't read and understand English, that you have someone read it back to you in your own language, because you're signing your name to it. So you're kind of stuck. We do what we can, but you're kind of stuck in that sense. But we had to explain all this to the immigration judge. We fixed the material inconsistencies, and the judge accepted the exception to the 1 year filing deadline, and she was approved. And she is a U.S. citizen now, and I think she's a U.S. citizen. I know she has her green card. I think she's eligible this year for citizenship. But anyways, I was really excited that day. To finally litigate a case in immigration court and win. I was proud to do it for a woman, to help her to escape a domestic violence situation. And unfortunately, a lot of these issues are still going on in the world today, and it's something that we all need to kind of take a stand against. Otherwise, it will never end for people like her. Anyways, so that is all for today for notable approvals. Join us tomorrow night. I will not have a notable approval tomorrow, but I will have a live Q&A discussion on asylum and withholding of removal. You can send us questions in advance or ask us questions live. We hope to see you all there, and thanks for watching.